Hey friends,
Welcome to Outlaw-In-Logic. Thank you for shining your light here. In this video, please join Outlaw-In-Logic as we investigate why a failed experiment indeed fails. No quotation marks required. This experiment is labeled failed because its designers were unsuccessful in achieving their original goal, confirming the existence of a specific substance. However, their lack of confirmation was later misinterpreted by others as a positive confirmation of something else entirely. To many, the results became definitive proof of that substance's non-existence. The study in question is the Michelson-Morley experiment, which we will refer to as the MME for simplicity. The substance it supposedly dismissed is known as the ether. Around the time the MME was published, the view that light behaved as waves propagating through a medium was becoming increasingly dominant over the particle theory. To solidify the wave concept, proving the existence of a luminiferous medium was critical. Based on some Greek myths, ether became the convenient term used to name this medium. The MME designers reasoned that if light propagates as waves through a medium, they could produce wave interference with two light beams, and further force a fringe shift to be observed. When the experiment was published in 1887, the apparatus used was the one shown on the left side of this image. It was designed to be an improved version of the initial setup seen on the right. Whether using the older or newer version, the primary scientific principles remain the same. In fact, for the sake of illustration, the older version makes it much easier to grasp the core mechanics of the experiment. The above diagram is the direct graphical interpretation of the experiment setup. Here, M is a silver-lined, semi-transparent mirror. This mirror is able to split the single light beam from the light source, S, into two. Each of these two new beams propagates along one arm that is perpendicular to the other. After being reflected in mirror M1 and M2 respectively, they will come back to mirror M. At M, they jointly move forward to the telescope, which is below the diagram and not shown here. Consequently, they, together, generate a wave interference pattern in the view of the telescope. The apparatus is always at rest relative to the Earth, and of course, to the Earth's atmosphere, too. Its longitudinal arm points along the tangential direction of the Earth's orbital path, sharing the Earth's velocity relative to the Sun. The transverse arm points toward the Sun, which is the frame where the ether is hypothesized to be anchored. Based on an assumption taken for granted at the time, light travels through this ether, if exists, at a constant speed c in any direction. Subsequently, it must mean light moving along the Earth's orbit at no other speed but c. Meanwhile, the MME also assumed the speed of light remains c in the atmosphere where both perpendicular arms of the apparatus are found. Since the speed of light in air is nearly identical to its speed in a vacuum, this assumption is generally easy to accept. However, over here, the MME created a conflict that needed the designer's reconciliation. For the same light beam moving along the longitudinal arm, what is its speed if measured against the Earth's orbit? Is it c or c plus v?
So children, they both are equal. Isn't it easy?
Can math
Can
really
math
do that?
really do that?
Can math really do that?
If anyone suggests resolving this conflict with relativity's second postulate, he or she is cordially invited to watch another video by Outlaw-In-Logic. The video title is Mathematical Mirages Created by Special Relativity. In that video, we demonstrate how relativity's second postulate leads to a self-refuting equation. Now, let's come back to our experiment. MME. To an observer on Earth, if light covers the length L1 at speed c from mirror M to mirror M1, that same beam would require a speed of c plus v to cross that same gap within the Earth's orbit. This speed c plus v directly contradicts the MME's own assumption that light must propagate at speed c in the Sun's frame, or the Aether frame, where the Earth's orbit bathes in. The above diagram shows that within the same duration the beam completes L1 in the longitudinal arm. It completes distance d' on the orbit. Obviously, d' is larger than L1. Now, let's shift the entire picture to the left a little to make room for the presentation of some movement that follows. During the return trip from M1 back to M, the light speed on the orbit would have to be c minus v, forcing the MME to self-refute its own premises once again. When the beam touches M, the beam would have covered a distance of L1 on the longitudinal arm, but only d' on the orbit. Obviously, d' is smaller than L1. To obtain the total time t1 that light spends on the round trip on the orbit, the MME puts up equation 1 above. The two unequal terms in equation 1 must mean that light spends unequal durations between its forward and backward trip on the orbit. However, it is not what can be observed by anyone next to the apparatus. So, here is the second self-contradiction in the reasoning of this experiment. To eliminate the contradiction, equation 1 needs to be modified into equation 1a, as shown above. Regarding the beam moving along the transverse arm, the MME imagines this beam forms the hypotenuse of a right triangle within the Aether or solar frame. The hypotenuse is represented by line BM1 in the above diagram. The height of the right triangle is L2, which is the length of the transverse arm. The base of the right triangle is E, which is on the axial line of the longitudinal arm. The length of E is equal to V times 0.5 T2. T2 is the total time for the beam to complete a round trip between mirror M and M2. Unfortunately, no physical light beam can ever exist on line BM1, as the MME imagines. The light beam moving toward M2 along the transverse arm is the only beam reflected by mirror M, as a continuous beam produced by reflection. Its source point must remain permanently rooted to the reflective mirror M, a condition BM1 fails to meet, rather than being a true light beam. BM1 is merely the historical locus of an infinitesimally tiny spark of light, now touching M2. By the time the spark reaches M2, mirror M has moved away from its starting location in the Sun's frame by a distance of E. Again, BM1 is a record of history found in the Aether frame. It cannot represent a continuous light beam. Naturally, then, No light beam propagates along BM2 either. From the MME perspective, the right triangle formed by hypotenuse BM1, the displacement E, and the height of L2 together enable the existence of the above equation. The problem is that the MME also assigns c as the speed of light traveling directly along L2, and thus comes equation 4. Substituting equation 4 into 3. And because of the assumed speed c4, light on BM1 and the ether, we get equation 5. Now, not only does simple arithmetic fails equation 5, but the Pythagorean theorem must reject it, too. In short, the beams on both the longitudinal and transverse arms failed to behave as the designers believed and predicted. Even though the orientation of the apparatus related to the Sun changes due to the Earth's self-spinning and seasonal orbital movement, the same disappointment to the designers persists. The nature of errors introduced in this experiment appears involving both physics and mathematics. For too long, people have accepted that the ether was dismissed because the MME empirically denied it, and Einstein's special relativity theoretically repelled it. However, as shown in this Outlaw-In-Logic video series, both evidences dismissing ether appear so unreliable. Other than that, do we have other evidence to dismiss ether? If not, couldn't this mean that the door to the search for ether remains wide open? Please come again to join Outlaw-In-Logic in the next video, in which we will explore together how, theoretically, ether not only exists, but it is also the singular source of gravity. With simple experiment, we will show what is traditionally called gravitational attraction is actually an illusion, misinterpreted from inherent fluidic pressure. Thank you very much. Hope to see you and read your comments soon. Please subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you'll know when a new video is out. You will inspire us tremendously by honoring us with your like.